What's going on, guys? Joey here. Just wanted to give you a little disclaimer before you get into this episode. So this is going to be with Mr. Drew Hartmann, who's one of our longtime clients. He's lost 119 pounds, and he's going to be talking about how he lost 100 of those pounds in just 6 months and has since kept it off. And when it comes to the format of this podcast, actually Gabe and I filmed it together, and so you'll hear us say, the Gabe and Joey show. And I'm definitely swiping it for my own show, and I believe Gabe, swiped it for his own podcast now as well. So you'll probably see this episode on both of our channels if you follow him as well. And I just wanted to give that disclaimer so you guys know what's going on, and before you get into it, actually have some context. So that's it. I hope you enjoy the interview. Drew's an amazing human being, an amazing guy, and he's had an awesome, inspirational transformation inside of DK. So hope you guys enjoy the video. Talk soon.
I say
intro, bro. Rolls in.
Welcome to the Gabe and Joey show. This is.
Oh, it sounds so cool to say. Sounds so cool.
Yeah, it does sound cool.
Yeah, we'll roll with that name for now.
This has been a long time coming. We do absolutely have the branded mugs for a reason. I'm sad that you don't have the Black Rifle mug, but
it's dirty.
It's dirty. Yeah, it's dirty. So that's the way we operate. Efficiency. If it's a dirty mug, we don't wash it. We just grab the other mug.
Just grab the next mug.
Right. But we have a very special guest here today.
A who? Great. We have a who?
What? We have a very special guest here today on the podcast, Drew Hartmann. He's been one of the clients of Default Kings for exactly a year today? Is it?
A year yesterday. Yeah, a year and 2 days or something like that. Yeah.
A year and 2 days. And I mean, how much weight have you lost total in a year and 2 days?
Total getting right at about 120 pounds.
120 pounds.
Yeah.
120 pounds down. So this is a podcast that none of us could have predicted happening a year ago today when we had our first conversation.
I don't know. I remember our kickoff call very clearly.
Yeah.
I remember I think you were in Chicago.
Yeah.
Kickoff
Yeah,
call.
it's
You were visiting
Chicago,
family.
every year.
I don't know
Christmas.
why, but for some reason, because I take so many of them, but for some reason I just remember yours very clearly. Maybe it was because you started to see rapid success. So I was like, I remember his kickoff call was good. I remember when a guy has a good kickoff call.
Yeah.
I'm like, this guy's gonna crush it.
Yeah.
And that was right away how I felt with yours.
Nice.
What do you remember from that first conversation?
First conversation with you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so first conversation with you was interesting because I was kind of at a point where I knew a change had to happen, but hadn't really done it or tried, and a couple weeks later failed, and talking to you and kind of getting into a little bit of the deeper behind the scenes, telling you things I hadn't really talked about with some other people or people even close to me. And then it was definitely kind of eye-opening a little bit just to show that I need to do something more than what I've been doing. There was more to my existence than just kind of going through the motions in the current state.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest turning point on that call was you had asked me what are you weighing in at now? And I'm like, well, the last time I weighed myself, I think at that time I even told you, probably somewhere around high twos, something like that. Mm-hmm. And then you were like, well, do you have a scale? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, go weigh yourself. You're like, what?
Like, you have your phone? You have your phone on you right now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like you can me do some style. And so I kind of got taken aback by that. And you're like, no, I'll wait. And so I went over and weighed myself, and ended up being about almost 30 pounds more than what I was thinking it was going to be. And came back, and I remember specifically almost putting my head down when I told you that, because it was almost like, look, there was definitely shame there that I was kind of lying to myself, saying, I'm probably high twos, and then ended up being 325, I think was the number.
Yeah.
So it's that was kind of a little bit of a turning point of something's got to change, because I'm definitely just sitting here lying to myself.
Yeah, dude, that's interesting. I feel like we were talking about this yesterday. The most intriguing and interesting and entertaining part of those initial conversations for me is the fact that I've heard the conversation thousands of times, seen the other side of it. So I'll be talking to a fully grown man, and I'll be listening to the lies that they tell themselves come out of their mouth, kind of listening. But then there's a certain point where after 8 lies back to back that they realize are all excuses, you'll see a fully grown man and be like, whoa, this kid is seeing straight through my BS. And they'll be like, never mind. I don't want to make excuses. I'm like, well, I mean, there's a reason we're here. But that's interesting that like you kind of have that moment where you're like, whoa, I convinced myself that I was 270 something.
Yeah.
Or high twos.
And
yeah. I'm actually 30 pounds heavier than.
Yeah, and it was always something where I always felt like I had a good, like, realistic idea of like not making excuses. Mm-hmm. But then on that call, I remember making excuses because I had lost weight in the past, and then like through the pandemic and all that. Started to gain it back because I kind of
the thing that shall not be named on Spotify.
Oh shit. So I started throwing some of those excuses out that like everyone in the country started talking about as that as an excuse for everything.
Yeah.
And but I thought I had a good handle on saying like, well, that is my excuse. That's no excuse, Mm-hmm. But then after talking to you, I was like, no, I am using that as an excuse. It's not. It's not a reason to just kind of give up and not continue with what I was doing at that time.
Well, the thing that was always, I don't know if it's like interesting, but it's the thing that I thought about with your situation is you'd lost a significant amount of weight before. Because obviously losing 119, 120 pounds in 1 year is like crazy. But you'd done that previously. How far before did you do that? Like, was it like 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? How long before was that?
2016, 2017 probably is around the time I was my lowest.
And was there like a specific turning point that you started to gain the weight back after that first time? Like, was there an event that happened? Was there something traumatic going on that occurred that made that happen?
So nothing necessarily traumatic at that time, but in kind of I've actually gone through this and like journaled about this a lot. And I kind of lost it even quicker than I did this time. I was going hardcore cardio.
Even quicker than this time? The first time you lost it was quicker than this?
Yeah.
I was going to say, because 120 pounds a year, it is crazy.
Yeah, no, but I was doing like hardcore cardio, maybe 1,400, 1,500 calories a day. Like I was just, It was just so unhealthy the way I did it. And just, I was doing spin classes 5 days a week, doing these other classes.
Did you feel that while that was going on? Were you like, this is just like too much? This is extreme?
No, I felt like, this is success. Like in my eyes, I was like getting the confirmation from outside people. I was getting the compliments. I was getting, wow, you're doing great. All this stuff. And then I think it was about July is when I kind of hit my lowest weight the first time. And I started around the same time in January, and then July was like kind of my lowest. And I was kind of at the point where I hit my goal. I didn't necessarily have anything in my mind about like, okay, now like strength training is going to be my next step or anything like that. I didn't have a goal of, okay, I want to do this next. Mm-hmm. So then the compliments kind of stopped too, because now you're just the skinny guy.
Yeah.
So there was no more outside confirmation, and it was just like, okay, like now what? Like nothing really changed in my life. Now I'm just still sitting here watching TV, but I'm taking classes 5 days a week for these spin classes, and okay, well maybe I can kind of get a little bit less strict on the diet, maybe go out a little bit more and get fast food a little bit more, and then the whole again COVID shit started happening, and then that was kind of like the excuse to me that okay, the gym closed down, so now those classes gone. That was kind of my last bit of daily confirmation from those people that I would see every single day in those classes, because I was even teaching spin classes by that point. So you would go in and have these same group of people there every day, and I'm not trying to disappoint them, so kind of kept it going, but the weight started creeping back. I think at that point I was probably about 35 pounds more than my lowest, so it slowly started to creep back. So I was up like close to 235, 240 again. And then once all those classes got shut down and everything, and I'm just sitting at home, like I kept it up for another month or two of like trying to get outside and go on the bike and go out and take walks and runs and stuff, and then completely just went back to the same old sedentary sitting down watching TV.
What do you feel like is different this time around? Like, what do you feel like the actual change was?
Yeah, so I think this time around I feel like I did it a lot more for me as opposed to like for that. I'm not necessarily looking for that outside confirmation. Yeah, it's always nice to have someone tell you, hey, you look good or whatever.
Hey, you're a stallion. Like,
so tall and handsome.
Yeah, I still have trouble taking those compliments.
Nice blue eyes, tall, handsome. Well, we always throw it in as much as we can too. It's funny because I know you're like, thanks guys.
Yeah, so I'm trying to do better about actually accepting compliments. That's like one thing that I wrote down, like accept compliments in my journal, because it's like I don't accept compliments well, and it's like, oh, you're fine. It's fine. You don't need to say that.
Yeah. Well, one thing we do.
You don't need to remind me how tall and handsome.
I know I'm tall and handsome. So one of the things we do is anytime we're hanging out with Drew, and there's like any woman that's close to his age that gives him like any iota of attention, we're like, dude, like I think she's hitting on you.
I was like, no.
Yeah. But she's like, I'm not interested. Not my type.
Well, I think in the interest of being as educational as possible for listeners, I'm sure a lot of guys that are going to listen are DK guys, people that are thinking about DK, maybe people that have been through DK. Mm-hmm. So I think, I don't know where you're at with it. I'm willing to go as deep as humanly possible with like the actual tactical stuff that was different this time than last time. That way the listeners and people watching can leave this podcast, leave this recording, and go apply things to it. Mm-hmm. So like compared to that first time that you lost all the weight and then gained it back, and then the second time that you've lost it and sustained it much longer, and now you're going to run a freaking Ironman. Obviously, I think there's a big difference in sustainability. Yeah, still an Ironman. You're still going to get the IM, brother. You're still going to get the IM, right? Like, it sounds like already, right away, the intention coming into it has shifted. That was like the first thing, right? Where you're focused on it's for you this time.
Yeah.
And let's dive right into, I would love to dive right into like the actual training aspect. Like you were doing spin classes, sounds like you're doing a lot of cardio.
Yeah.
Like what was your physical regimen the first time? What's your physical regimen now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the first time was 100% cardio. Like I did a couple classes a week of like, classes of what they call strength, which is literally just cardio with some weights.
Like super lightweights.
Exactly, yeah, like whatever they have in the little gym thing. You're doing 50-pound.
You're just prancing around with the neighborhood moms.
Exactly. And hey,
it's go down 45.
Totally true. Yeah. It was me and like two other guys in the class, and it was like we were a little around back.
It's super true because at the gym I used to work at, like there was group fitness classes all the time. Mm-hmm. It was like 95% women, but there'd be like two dads there, and you're like, come on, I know why you're there.
Yeah, so it was 100% cardio basically, and just extreme calorie deficit. Yeah, I cut myself out constantly to the point where I would decline going out with friends. I would decline invitations to different things just because I'm like, I know if I go there, I'm gonna drink a ton. That's gonna put me back a couple days. Yeah. I gotta keep up with the friends because if they're drinking, I gotta be drinking. I can't say I'm not gonna drink. So it's just real kind of poor mindset overall. As opposed to this time where I don't think I did actual like not hardcore, but actual like what I consider real cardio until maybe 4 months in when I actually started like trying to run a mile a day after the Nashville retreat. And Andre Heichel gave that idea to me that he's doing that mile a day. I'm like, well, maybe I should do that. That'd be something interesting to kind of just try to get back into a little bit of cardio.
Yeah.
But before that, it was literally incline walks, 10 to 20 minute incline walks after my workouts. That was like the extent of my cardio, and just 100% strength training, strength focused resistance training. That was it.
Yeah.
So that was a big change for me because, I had never done that in my entire life. I've never like been an actual strength training regimen or anything like that.
How do you feel like what felt different doing strength training versus just being like a pure cardio dude?
Definitely. I love the actual like results because it wasn't just a number on the scale. You can see it in the mirror. You can see like, wow, that's a little bit of definition forming there, a little bit of actual like muscle gain happening. The number on the scale was going down as like the PRs, the numbers and the weights were going up. So that was a kind of cool thing to see. And it was kind of always giving me that next step of like, hey, this is my next goal. I want to hit this weight, or I want to increase on this lift, whatever it may be, as opposed to the last time where it was just running to run or biking to bike. There was no goal there. It was just calorie burn, and that was it.
I think that's one of like the most interesting things about strength training. Like we talk about the physiological effects and why like the way that we set people up to train with training to failure, trying to progressively overload all the time is like the most efficient way on paper to technically gain muscle and add lean muscle mass. But I also think it's the most beneficial way psychologically to train because literally every set you do is proof to your mind that you're progressing.
Yeah.
And every time you step into the gym, there's not just like one thing you need to get better at, but every set you need to get better at. And so it's that true like more than 1% better a day. It's, however many sets you're doing percent better a day.
Mm-hmm.
So it keeps you going psychologically, and it trains your mind too. What do you feel like were some of the mindset shifts this time around versus last time?
Yeah, my mindset shifts, there were definitely a lot of them. I kind of never really, this was really the first time in my entire life that I really invested in myself. I've always kind of gone down the kind of typical path of, you graduate high school, you graduate college, you get your job, you work your job for 40 years and you retire. Mm-hmm. And this is really the first time that kind of my mindset changed, where it's like, it doesn't need to be that black and white or that like uninspiring, maybe is the word.
Yeah.
Where, I can like actually enjoy my life before retirement. I don't have to just work this, normal job and just, go through the motions of life. So this was really the first time I actually invested and, put money towards my fitness, my health, my, financial state, my emotional state, everything. And that was a big mindset shift for me, because it was, prior to that, it was always just about, save for retirement was like the goal. And after, this year, it's much more about like, enjoying life day to day as much as possible, and not necessarily worrying about 20 years from now, but let's focus on being the best person I can today, and then everything else will come with that.
Yeah, I feel like that's a huge limiting belief that, like you said, the average uninspiring person has, right? Of just saving everything they have until they get to retirement and hopefully enjoy retirement a little bit. But it's cool to see that belief shift, because like seeing where you are now, living a better life before retirement, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and financially, because naturally improving your beliefs literally leads you to finding more avenues to increase your wealth, which is really interesting, because like we can have it all right now and have more, when we retire, period.
Right. Yeah, and one thing I'll say, kind of besides just joining DK, but another thing that kind of triggered that, and I talked about this a ton of different times, but that plan of retiring when you're 60 was, always in the mind. And then, my dad, he followed that plan. He went, busted his ass, self-made businessman, owned his own shop, auto shop for years, working 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. every single day. And just, he had this big retirement plan to, sell the shop, kind of cash in a little bit and go enjoy. My parents, they built a house out in Arizona near me, second home that they were going to use as their retirement home. And then, he's 64, and then all of a sudden, one day has a stroke. 2 days later, he's, taking off life support. So it's like, he worked his entire life, had this huge plan for his 65 plus age bracket, and all of a sudden, that plan's gone. So it's like, thinking back, looking at my males in my family tree, I don't think any of them live past 65.
Wow.
I have one uncle that's actually older, if he's watching, but I forgot about that. He's 70. But besides him, not one of my male family members live past 65. So it's kind of thinking like, I'm going to work my ass off and save all this money to hopefully have maybe a few $1,000,000 in the bank at 60, and then all of a sudden who knows how long I'm going to survive. And especially at the path I was going with the health choices I was making, I definitely didn't have a good prognosis to live much longer than that. So it's that was kind of a big trigger for me, that there's got to be something more out there, and that kind of triggered me into getting back connected with my faith and a new church, and which triggered me to start following a little bit more of the Christian side of Twitter or X, which had me follow Gabe here, and that kind of started everything.
I want to make sure we circle back to faith for sure, because I feel like that's obviously a big part of your story, at least in the last few years. Obviously, it's a big part of what we do, but something that you mentioned earlier was this idea of like people living this uninspiring life, like a very traditional life. And I'm always Mr. like not throw shade or like traditional path. Like I know full well like what I did is not normal. Like most people don't like go to college, drop out, do a business at 20 years old. Like it's not very normal. And then just doing any sort of investment in yourself is not normal. However, on the side of I don't want to throw shade at that. I know that's a fit for most people.
Yeah.
But for you, when you were in that quote unquote uninspiring journey, did it always feel off? Like did you always feel like you were called to do more?
Yeah, I always felt like I was called to do more, that I was not succeeding as much as I should be, but I also knew that like the current company I'm still with wasn't necessarily the path that was going to get me to those extreme heights of success. But yeah, I always kind of had that thought that there was more out there for me, but it really probably didn't really hit until probably my mid-30s. I'm 39 right now. So probably my mid-30s is when I really started to see that there's got to be something better out there. I started looking more into finance. I was looking more into alternate ways to make money, and just hadn't really pulled any triggers, and just kind of stayed in the same loop of kind of being sedentary with every aspect of my life, I'll say.
Yeah, interesting.
And then I think going through this whole journey the past year has kind of opened my eyes up to like a ton of different ways to go, and there's not that single path. There's so many different paths you can take. And like you said, not to throw shade at anything because it works for people, but I had many conversations with even friends as I was going through this, and like telling them different ideas I have of like things I want to do. And I've gotten multiple comments of, we're too old for that. Like, we're too old to change that. Like, you're already at the, you're already successful. What do you, like, you already have a nice house.
What, you're 38, right?
39 now. Yeah.
39.
Yeah. But yeah, I got multiple comments. You already have a nice house. You have, you make good money with your job. Like, why would you ever quit your job? It's like, well, so that's, like you said, limiting beliefs. It just, that was kind of, my age group, I think that was kind of ingrained that's just what you do. You get your job, you work your job, and you retire at some point.
It's always interesting to me to like think about what makes you be a person that pulls that trigger. Like I was on a podcast one time that was called I think it was like Competitive Edge or Hidden Edge or something like this. And essentially I get on the podcast, it was through a podcast center, so like I didn't know the guy. And I get on the podcast, and like the first question he's like, so what makes you special? I'm like, yo, what? Like no intro, nothing, straight into it. And that's what makes me ask that question. So I'm going to essentially ask you the same question, because I think most people do have that feeling, right? When you're living that like non-inspiring path, like I think the majority of people, especially men, do feel that, hey, it's like, is this it? Like, is there more to this? So what do you think about you, Drew Hartmann, makes you somebody that's willing to pull the trigger and move towards something better? Like what do you think it is about you that makes you do that?
Yeah, I think I'll take it back to my dad. He was always someone that always like strive for more and strive to like make as much money as possible and bust his ass. He was kind of the old school of nowadays it's like the goal is to get automated as much as possible and kind of work as little as possible to make as much money as possible. But back in his age, it was, hey, I'm gonna work 12 hours a day, I'm gonna bust my ass, I'm gonna make as much money as possible. So I think it kind of comes back to that, where I always saw him. He was a business owner his entire life, and he never worked for anyone as far as I can remember. And that was always inspiring to me to see that you don't have to follow that traditional path. And even with growing up with that, I still kind of went more the traditional way, but always kind of had that in the back of my mind that if you do go out, bust your ass, you can make something for yourself.
It's really interesting because we talk about you said something really profound when you said that you're kind of sedentary in every single area of life, right? Like comfortable, essentially.
Comfortable, very comfortable.
So I think that comfort can be like one of our biggest killers. A lot of times we don't actually look for a solution to any problem until the problem becomes so painful that it's no longer bearable, right? So what do you feel like for you was, and I'm not asking specifically about fitness, finances, whatever it may be, faith, I'm asking just in general, what was the thing for you that kind of was the straw that broke the camel's back that made you like reconcile the fact that, hey, I've been comfortable, I've been sedentary on all areas of life, and I need to make a change? What was the straw that broke the camel's back?
So I think one thing that kind of comes to mind is even after I started with DK, it was in April, the retreat in Nashville. That retreat with shout out to Jeremy Newsom.
You'd already lost like 75 pounds by then, hadn't you?
I think I was down to around 260, so about 50 or about 60 pounds I think at that point. 65
I remember
pounds.
like you were already crushing it when we went to
so
Nashville.
I was down to about 65 at that point. And kind of I got into that room, and I was one of the older guys, or I think I was the oldest guy in that room, and I was seeing all these, like, as you mentioned before, like kid. I was seeing all these in my like view, like all these kids that were just killing it. Just their businesses, they were starting businesses and just like excelling in every aspect of life in my at least outside view sitting there. And all of them went down different paths. None of them for the most part, went the traditional path of just finding a job. They all kind of went and were doing their own thing and kind of plowing their own field. And it was kind of that moment that was like, wow, like I really haven't done much. Like I have a great job, and to the average person looking in, I'm a very successful person. I have a great job, great house, great life on the outside. But when I actually look at it and look at that there were so many other opportunities out there that I just wasn't seeing or just kind of blind to, I think that was kind of a trigger to me that I need to really kind of reevaluate what's next for me.
Yeah, I think something that jumps out to me about the thought process that keeps us stuck a lot of the times is just like the fact that we can easily compare ourselves to others, right? And you can have this perspective of, well, to the outside looking in, to the average person, I'm doing really well, I'm really successful, right? It's so easy to do that in business. It's so easy to do that in our health and fitness. Like 80% of the guys that I talk to who have a self-desire to improve are like, well, my wife doesn't really mind. And like to the average person, I'm not like really obese. I'm like, well, yeah, we're not talking about what they think. We're talking about how you feel, right? And that's one of the biggest things that can keep us trapped. So I think I'm curious to, like, when you were in that state of, okay, number one, you kind of made that jump already with your health, your fitness. But then you're talking about being at the retreat, looking around and saying, I want more for me. Where do you see yourself actually going? Like, what's the new desire that you actually made the decision to start chasing?
Yeah. So definitely, I tried to really expand in a lot of different aspects of my life. Like you mentioned the faith side, and get back to later, whatever. But that's definitely something that I've really dove into over the last couple of years, even before joining DK. About 8 months prior to that is when I started going back to church, actually Easter of 2022 or whatever.
Yeah. Was that before or was that after your dad died?
That was after. Yeah, and that's what triggered that.
Trigger.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my dad died in February and got back to back home in Arizona in March, and then like started looking for a church. I'm like, I need something more.
Yeah.
So that definitely triggered that, and then 8 months later is when or 6 months later, where we joined DK. But I forgot where I was going with that. But yeah, so what was the question? I'm sorry.
The question was like, where do you see yourself going?
Oh, so and all that's my face. So in regards to like on the financial side, I've really been diving into other ways to kind of earn a living and kind of reevaluate what's important to me. Because again, it was always kind of similar to my first weight loss. I've always kind of lived where it was like trying to impress people. Like, okay, I have the big house because when I have people visit, I want to get those comments, that outside reassurance that, hey, you're doing good, you know? And that kind of had to get reevaluated where it's like, now, do I really need that? Do I really care if I'm, in this great big house, if I'm just, there alone for the couple times a month that people are actually visiting, or a couple times a year, I should say. So that was kind of another aspect, just evaluating what's important there, what's important on the relationship side, where I said, before I was really, turning down opportunities to even go out because I was trying to watch my calories. Whereas, I really tried to dive into relationships and really dive into, expanding friendships and that type of thing, and just grow and meeting new people and trying to expand my circle. And then, just, eventually being able to, pull that trigger of, changing careers. Not going through a couple different avenues. Again, shout out to Jeremy Newsom.
Shout out Jeremy.
Some
there's going to be a few Jeremy Newsom shout outs on this podcast. Like I used to.
4 or 5,
episode.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be 1 or 2 every episode.
Yeah, so
he'll make his way into the conversation.
He gets his residual check. But yeah, so that, kind of working with him and kind of seeing that there is other opportunities out there that don't.
Are you doing his one-on-one?
Don't require. Pardon?
Are you doing his one-on-one?
No.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe you did his one-on-one.
No, just a group class, but mastermind. But yeah, it's but kind of seeing as just other opportunities and trying to see. I don't necessarily have that defined out yet. I don't think exactly timeline and when that's gonna be able to take place, but a lot of things kind of going through.
A lot of progression.
Yeah, still a lot of progression.
Nice.
And the faith is the one that I'd like to circle back to now. I feel like it's a good time. Like, you mentioned that kind of kicked in right after your dad. That a few months later you joined DK, and I feel like probably I don't know what your personal relationship was like with Christ or things like that, but now for sure I feel like you're very involved with your faith. So how has that played a role in this whole thing?
Yeah, I think just like having a regimen when it comes to like fitness. I think that's very similar, having a regimen when it comes to faith. It's I joined my current church in Easter, actually, right after my dad died. So about a month or two after I got back home. And I know a lot of people say, okay, you have to kind of try to find your church, and you kind of go church hunting or whatever, church hopping,
church shopping,
week to week. And this one, I kind of went in, and literally within 20 minutes, I was like, this feels right. And so it worked out where I found a church that worked for me. And then I kind of started diving into a bunch of different fields, and kind of looking on Twitter, and my Twitter feed started changing because some of the DK teaches to adjust your input. So I was unfollowing a lot of things that kind of raised stress and raised anxiety in me, and following things that were more positive and more
For those of you that don't know, we are very clear about our values, but we do generally recommend from abstaining from only flooding your mind with the political intakes, just because of how it affects your psyche, how it affects your stress levels.
Yeah, I like to stay informed, but it'll just take you down horrible paths.
It's just another form of entertainment in my mind. Like,
it
is
entertaining.
It's obviously it's like different than like sports, because it can obviously directly affect how your life plays out with things like taxes and who's in charge and things like that. But in my mind, it's
I will also say
entertainment.
There may be a level of Florida apathy, because here in free Florida, the general qualms with the world don't really affect us, right? Unless they come knocking on our door, which even if they came knocking on our door, there'd be certain things we'd be capable of doing that would allow us to sustain our way of living. Let's just say that. But I understand that if you live somewhere like Canada, or you live in another state, that it could affect your life in a more intense
country.
Way. This is my sympathy. This is
your empathy coming out?
This is my empathy coming out. Yeah.
Empathy for unfree.
I understand that there's more tyrannical things going on in the world. Anyway, we're sidetracked here. Faith journey. You find a church.
Big sidetrack.
You find a church that feels
Unfollowed, deleted my alt-right Twitter account.
Yeah, there were some real concerns. I remember January 4th or 5th rolled around, and I was like, hold on.
January 6th.
Whoa. Anyway.
We're going to get flagged. Our first episode.
Yeah. Okay, let's get back to faith.
We need Andrew Editor to just like censor all these words so we don't get taken down by the manual YouTube review.
Yeah, let's get back to faith. So you find a church.
Back to God.
Back to God. You find a church that feels right. And
I think that was really important, because I grew up Catholic, and was very every week in Catholic church up until probably high school, when once my grandma passed, then we kind of stopped going weekly, and then we kind of turned into the Christmas and Easter goers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, grandma's the core.
Exactly.
The Catholic faith is a grandma core for sure.
Yeah. And I kind of, going through Catholic services and stuff, I never left saying, oh wow, that touched me, or I really took something out of that. I never had that feeling. I was young, so that probably played into it a little bit, but literally that first service, it was Easter service, but it was not like your typical, what I was expecting, some positive Easter. He was very matter of fact, and I can't remember the message at this point, but I remember it not being something I expected for Easter. And I walked out of there feeling wow, that actually I aligned it, and I think I even teared up a couple times.
It'll get you, bro.
Which was kind of crazy. Again, I was still thinking about my dad at that point, and kind of everything he said, I was pulling back into that, and so that was kind of a real telling moment to me that wow, that's faith doesn't have to be just this act of going to church every week. It's you should feel something more when you're walking out of service, or when you're hearing something, some video, whatever it is. So that kind of led me into again following people that more aligned with that practice, and again following individuals like you, because then I started to feel okay, I need to maybe start taking more control of my life, and making some changes here. So then I started following more fitness folks on Twitter.
Twitness.
That's
legit.
It's a new thing. So I started following more of that, and that kind of again led me to you, and I feel like it's just that simple follow on Twitter kind of led to a whole path of different aspects of this whole journey.
Yeah.
Man, it'll get you. It'll get you, bro.
Yeah.
I was tearing up at church last weekend, bro.
I was like, you're describing my experience every week.
Yeah. Worship,
tearing up and pointing back to everything in your life.
Yeah.
But no, it's I think something that I really kind of adopted as a belief. I think sometime last year, a little bit before, is like your pastor should offend you, and you probably should actually be at some point reading the Word of God and being like, oh my gosh, like why'd you have to say that, Jesus? Because it like challenges the way that you think, that you act, that you behave, that you believe. But it almost feels like pandering when you don't experience that. It's just like everything's okay and everything's fine and like. But like, if everything was okay and everything's fine, then why am I struggling? Then why am I suffering? Then how am I supposed to reconcile with this thing I'm facing in my life? Like, I want to know that I need to change, so that I can experience more peace, so I can experience more joy, more holiness in Christ. So it's cool that you had that experience where your pastor was very matter of fact and challenged you, right?
Yeah, he says all the time, like if you don't feel somewhat offended or challenged, then he's not doing his job. He said because the Bible's not always, rainbows and sunshine. It's some serious topics that will call you out on your stuff. So
there's table flipping Jesus energy. We talk about this all the time.
Exactly.
Right? Like we actually read the Word. I think it's so interesting how frequently we encounter something where Jesus is literally calling out, number one, like the Pharisees, the religious elites, but also his own disciples, right? Where he's like, why do you guys have such little faith? Like, why are you thinking this way? Why are you behaving this way? His own disciples. So if the people who literally walked with God were being called out that frequently, like, we should probably feel like we're being called out and challenged pretty frequently too.
Yeah, no, totally.
So anyways, our producer had us take a break to make sure we were still rolling. Me. I'm the producer. I'm the producer. But anyways, as we were talking about, not being afraid to be offended by your pastor. I put out a tweet about this yesterday. It was the same idea in coaching, where I don't think your coach should be your friend. I don't necessarily think anybody that's leading you in any capacity of life should be your friend. If you have, they should be a friendly person. You don't want somebody that's just an asshole. They should be a friendly person, and maybe you develop a friendship, but it's a bonus. I don't think the main objective of anybody that's leading you in any capacity, they're not there to be your friend. So that goes for coaches, that goes for pastors. That was the relationship that I had with my father growing up. He was there to lead me. That was it. Now we have a great, friendly relationship, but it's still my dad. When I raise my kids, that's how I'm going to be. My main priority is to be their parent. It's not to be their friend. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of get, a little mushy-gushy and feely-feely with their coaches and pastors and things like that. But the reality is, are they actually leading you if they're just making you feel good and they're just being friendly?
You know what's really interesting too? I heard some pastor talk about recently about how a lot of people just have a misconception of what real friendship is, because we talk about how friendships are, right? And if we think about our friendship, we challenge each other, we sharpen each other, we definitely say things that might offend each other from time to time. Offend each other, right? Not in terms of liberal tears or anything like that. Sorry.
Look at the camera.
But in the form of hey, dude, well, you kind of know that this needs to change, right? We challenge each other, sharpen each other. But so many people, especially in this day and age, expect to be validated in every single relationship, in every single friendship. But actually being a good friend, even if you're not in the position of leadership in someone's life, means that you should be leading them at least in some realm. You should be challenging them in some realm, right?
Yeah. One thing that, this kind of goes a little bit away from faith, but kind of in that aspect of challenging people and just having what your expectations are of your friends, because I feel like your expectation of your friends should be the highest of expectations. And if they're not reaching that, you should be trying to build them up to that point. And one thing that kind of triggered something in my head as I was kind of going through this is one of my buddies, Ted, texted me or whatever, asking to hang out. I'm like, I'm at the gym. I'll be, I can, maybe later, something like that, whatever it was. And he made a comment back oh, you're at the gym again. Don't you think you're going too much? And I'm like, no one ever asked me, do you think you're watching too much TV, or do you think you're eating too much, or do you think you're doing spending too much time on Twitter or whatever it is? No one ever asked me that. But the question I've gotten from more than one person is do you think are you going too hard in the gym? Are you doing too much in the gym?
Madness.
Which is such a weird mindset that people have that's the thing you'll question, but you won't question the things that are actually not productive for your life. So
that was a post. I forget which one of us put that out, but it was that same idea. People look at you crazy if you have 7 eggs for breakfast, but if you have 7 beers, they're like, yeah, whatever, dude.
Yeah, it's normal.
It's really like the amount of people who don't lift because they don't want to get hurt, and I'm like, brother, you're hurt right now. I'm like,
Yeah.
you're hurt now.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's essentially that idea too. Like, so you overheard this conversation I was having with a guy the other night where he was talking about that in like youth lifting, where it's like, well, kids, they shouldn't lift, they're gonna get hurt. And I'm like, I mean, I've been in gyms and trained kids that are 7 years old that are literally barbell back squatting at 7 years old. The only way they get hurt is if they do it wrong.
Yeah.
It's no different than anybody else. So like kids, they're gonna get hurt if they do it wrong. Lifting, you're gonna get hurt if you do it wrong. But what's even worse than that is, one, I would rather you go in there, lift, be wrong, and maybe you get hurt a little bit lifting, because your odds of actually getting hurt if you've never gone and strength trained and done anything is way higher. Right? So it's like, yeah, there's inherent risk in it. There's inherent risk in everything, but there's also a big risk in not going to the gym and not getting something, especially with like a youth athlete or something like that. Especially with people like as we get older.
Yeah. Let's dive into the weeds a little bit here.
Yeah,
Some of the
bring
training
it
stuff.
back. Bring it back
So
to the weeds.
there's a really interesting stat. I wish I knew the exact number. I believe it's either like 83 or 63% of individuals or something like that. But the most common disability in the United States is non-specific lower back pain. That's the most common disability. A disability is literally defined as some kind of physical or mental condition that inhibits your ability to exercise or execute normal daily tasks. So if your back hurts to the point at which like it's hard to put on your pants in the morning, or you can't throw a frisbee with your kid, you have a disability by definition, okay? That's why it's the most common disability in the United States. Now there's a massive majority of people with this disability of non-specific lower back pain who don't have any actual MRI imaging of lower back structural damage. And there's a massive majority of individuals with non-specific lower back pain, the most common disability in the United States, that don't lift weights, that don't do heavy back squats, that don't do heavy deadlifts, right? There's a small population of people that do lift heavy, and those aren't that's not the population reporting non-specific lower back pain, even though like we probably are the ones who are more likely to have lower back structural damage, but we don't report the non-specific lower back pain. It's the normal individual who doesn't do the training that feels the lower back pain, right? And that's why Granny Smith, even if she's never back squatted a day in her life, is going to need a hip replacement at 80, period, right? That's why the average guy at 50 is going to need a hip replacement, period, even if he wasn't deadlifting 500 pounds, right? So there's this weird misconception that it's actually lifting that's going to increase your risk of getting injured or increase your risk of needing some sort of repair at a certain age, when that stuff's going to happen anyway. And in fact, you're probably more likely to experience pain through all of that because your body's less resilient if you don't train, right? So I'd rather be the person who accidentally tweaks something in the gym, but throughout the 99% of my other normal daily life, I'm more resilient, have more energy, I'm stronger, I'm capable of enjoying everything else, right?
That's the exact thing I was saying with like the kids too. It's like, yeah, of course there's inherent risk if you're teaching a kid how to lift. There's inherent risk that the kid's potentially going to get hurt. But what are the odds that a kid gets hurt going and playing sports later in life because they didn't learn the foundations of actual biomechanics and then have the strength to support those joints, support those ligaments, support those muscles, right? And it's like that same thing with back pain that you're talking about. It legitimately costs businesses in the multiple hundred billions with a B per year. I wrote a whole like Twitter thread on this. I think it's 200 something billion that it costs businesses per year in sick days, pain, insurance claims, and things like that for non-specific lower back pain. And it's the general rule of thumb, and it is a broad generalization, but it is still a very good general rule of thumb, is this idea of like, if you have something that's hurting or something that's in pain, it's generally because that thing is weak, right? Generally speaking, or something around it is overcompensating
Because something else is weak.
Or I was gonna say, something around it is weak, so it's therefore overcompensating for that thing, and now that thing is in jeopardy of being injured, or it's causing pain or things like that. So it's this whole idea too of there's more, like, yes, there's risk in going and lifting weights. Yes, there's risk in going like jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah.
There's risk in these things, but there's also risk in not doing these things.
Yeah.
Right.
100%. 100%. Yeah, it's funny.
Well, I was one of those that always claimed, lower back pain. And the times that it even starts to feel it again is if I do go, 2-3 days without really getting out there and moving, and like I was traveling for three or so days a couple weeks back. And I started to I was sitting there feeling it. And then literally got to the gym, got moving, got some lifts in and all that. And then the next day I felt great. Like you said, I think being sedentary is just what leads to 99% of those issues. And I heard a quote, I can't remember what the exact quote is, but I think it was Gary Brecka that said it, but it was like kind of the current population's thought of aging is as comfortable as possible. Something to that effect is like people try to age by being comfortable, which means like, hey, don't move as much. You know, as you get older, you know, don't push yourself. Just kind of sit down, relax, watch TV.
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to that's the complete opposite of what you should be doing as you age. You should move more. You should ensure you're still active and, you know, constantly continuing to build and keep your, you know, bones strong and you know, keeping that muscle around those bones to ensure that you're not going to hurt yourself.
There's a poster that's plastered on every physical therapy clinic under God's green earth, at least when I was doing my time as an intern. It says, a body in motion stays in motion. And even when I was in there, I never once saw an older patient come in there that was post-op or anything like that that was in shape. So whatever it was that they came in for, post-hip replacement surgery, knee replacement surgery, shoulder replacement, whatever it might be, whatever they're coming for, none of them were in good shape. All of them were overweight, every single one of them, or in just poor general physical condition, right? And so the thing that always comes up in my mind is it's like these are all things that are potentially preventable with movement and with modalities that are natural.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Like, as people age and they stop being able to access like normal daily ranges of motion, like, oh, you know, grandma can't walk down the stairs without this thing, or she can't bend over and tie her shoes or something like that. It's like, how often throughout her normal daily life or her training did she ever enter that range of motion?
Right.
Never. Like, the reason you can't get up off of toilets without pain is because you never squat. But if you train normally and you squat, you know, dozens of reps per week with load at high intensity, then sitting down on a toilet will never be something that challenges you. Right?
It's the same idea as metabolism, right? People are like, hey, I'm going to have poor metabolism as I get older. And metabolically, yes, that's true. Your metabolism will slow down with age, or you're at least at an inherent disadvantage as you age when it comes to your metabolic health. But most of the time, it's not your metabolism. Actually, testosterone as well falls into this. It's not just your metabolism or your testosterone. It's the things that you stop doing as you get older that keep the testosterone high, keep the metabolism high. Those are things that people just stop doing as they age. If you stop doing them, of course, you're going to be coupling, one, different behavior that's going to negatively impact those things, and age. So you get double the effect.
Right.
If you just keep doing the things that you're doing, that we're all doing right now, if we never stop, our metabolism will slowly go down, our testosterone will slowly go down with time. But we're going to double that rate if we stop doing the things we're doing now.
Yeah. I feel like we're getting to the age where I'm 24, Joe's 23, where
Yeah, what age are we getting to? I don't know where you're
we're
going.
getting to the age where
Like what
it
age?
starts to it's becoming harder to identify if somebody's our age, because it's already at the point where it's like, you know, a few years post college age or whatever. Even though we didn't drop out of college, but a few
What's
years.
college?
What is college? Yeah, a few years post college age.
What is university?
Yeah, multiple years post high school age, post becoming an adult, where you start to see the effects of people living different lifestyles. Where like when we start to see other guys from our high school, we're like, what? That's him? Oh my god, right? Or when like I this is like always I have to like challenge myself to keep a straight face sometimes, because I'll hop on calls with people on Zoom or inquiring about joining Default Kings. And I'm like, oh, this dude's probably 34, 35 or something like that, 40 pounds overweight, whatever. And I'm like, how old are you? And they're like, oh, dude, I'm 24. And I'm just like, what? And like, you look 10 years older than you are because of the life that you live. But yeah, like you're saying, like it's not the age that inhibits your ability to do the things.
Yeah.
It's the fact that you stop doing the things that makes you age, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a very, it might be easy to tell your age, but my age, it's very telling. Like, there's very different levels of, like, my 39-year-old out there. You know, some that look like, wow, you're my age. And then others that, you know, that, again, it comes back to being active and staying active, and it just, that leads to it. You know?
Yeah, there's 50-year-olds that, like, can't wipe their own ass, and then there's 50-year-olds that can take the average 25-year-old's lunch money.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Yeah, and you're one of those guys that like you fall into the category of like you could easily say you're 29, and I don't think anybody would question you at all. Like you can say you're
appreciate
younger.
that.
No, for real, like 100%.
Yeah.
And I bet you like if you looked at pictures of yourself before you lost the weight, you wouldn't be able to say that, but now you would be able to say that. Right?
Yeah,
That's the other
you
thing.
definitely looked older a year ago.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when you sent me old pictures, because I remember I was like, you got like old pictures of you at like family events or something like that, like more like you in like a natural habitat, not in your mirror for your pictures and your progress pictures.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, like you did look older then than now.
No, yeah, I've gotten that before as well. Yeah, it's some of those pictures are terrifying. There's not too many of them. I avoided pictures like I like, but yeah.
A lot of people do.
It was it's definitely telling, and it's good to hear.
Well, you can essentially reverse aging, essentially by doing these things and making these lifestyle changes. And it's always funny to me when like biohacking guys start to pick up steam in the space.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is Gary Brecka one of those guys? I've heard about his stuff. I've seen some of his stuff. I don't know if he's like biohacking bro.
He's not biohacking. He's more about like kind of hacking your looking at your genes and like ensuring you're supplemented properly to enhance your current state, basically. So it's kind of biohacking.
Looking at your genes?
Like
Got it.
So like you do like a gene test,
Got
and then it tells you what genes you got that could potentially lead to some negative impact in your life, and some interesting stuff.
I smell.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anyways,
Hey.
I'll look into it before I comment. But anyways, like the simple thing there is, yeah, we can do that PTI. The simple thing with this idea of like reversing aging is really the simplest lifestyle changes are the things that are going to make the biggest impact. That's the thing that people overlook.
Yeah.
And that's why it's always, funny is a bad word. I don't want to say funny. That's crude of me. But it's funny when a guy is like, 50, 60 pounds overweight. He's like, bro, I think I need to do a 72-hour water fast and try to do this thing. I'm like, sure.
Yeah.
Like you could.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's probably 15 other things that are infinitely simpler than a 72-hour water fast that we could do to just improve how you feel.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, we could just go for a walk every single day this week for 20 minutes instead of fasting for 72 hours. I guarantee you're going to feel better than you did last week. And you're probably going to lose weight in the process.
You're probably not going to like end the 72-hour fast thinking you can eat your own hand, right?
Yeah.
But it's 100% true. I remember so a year and a half ago, about a year ago, we were on a fitness for entrepreneurs panel at an event that Andre's company put on, and the keynote right before our panel was Dan Fazio essentially talking about how beginner entrepreneurs focus way too much on micro optimizations, and his big message was like, you need to focus on the force multipliers. Your logo doesn't matter. You need to make more sales. You need to have more conversations, right? Essentially, the micro optimizations don't matter. You need to focus on the big stuff. And so I remember Andre asked me some question about like, what's your biggest piece of advice for the entrepreneurs here in the room when it comes to getting in shape? And I was like, stop focusing on the micro optimizations. Same thing Dan just talked about for your business, and focus on the force multipliers. Like never have I actually don't think I've ever eaten one piece of liver in my life. Not one time. Maybe my mom forced me to when I was like 5 years old, maybe once. But like, and I'm not actually like saying that liver is unhealthy. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that whatever benefit comes from a micro optimization from a lot of these biohacks is infinitely less impactful than something like you're saying, improving your activity level, managing your calorie intake, right? So yeah, like that's a frustrating thing. I want to kind of dive back into your process of getting here, right? Because anybody who's watching this is probably interested in how you lost 120 freaking pounds, and maybe they need to do the same thing. We talked about training differences. Let's talk about nutrition, and then also like let's wrap this thing up with the biggest stuff, the most important stuff. What were some of the things you did to actually have that mindset shift take place, have the internal shift take place, have the identity shift take place? So nutrition wise, what do you feel like are the biggest things you do now that you didn't do before that make it easier to lose weight, keep it off?
Yeah, I think. Well, yeah, I feel like prior to like the last time losing weight, I definitely eat a ton more. Like I've talked to you multiple times that you almost feel like you're forcing yourself to eat sometimes just to hit your goals each day when it comes to calories and protein.
Say that again one more time.
Say it louder for the clip.
Now you eat more.
I definitely eat more now than, for sure. Like quality is 100% better also, so that definitely allows you to eat much more. But I 100% eat more now than I did in the past. And most of the time I'm eating because like, hey, I need to get that protein in for the day, as opposed to like I'm starving, so I need to eat something. So there's not many cases throughout the day where I'm actually like hungry and having to eat. It's more because this is what my goal is, and this is what my plan is for the day. So definitely nutrition wise is focusing on protein first was always kind of a big change for me. In the past, that wasn't something I did. Maybe it was getting kind of your probably standard American, like 40 to 50 grams a day, something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas now I'm closer to that 200,
5 times that.
Yeah. 200 plus per day. So that was a big shift, is focusing on that, and from that, again, that very satiating, so you're not necessarily getting hungry faster. But yeah, eating a lot more in the nutrition side, that was probably the biggest thing for me, and that's kind of something I always look back at, how insane it was that I was literally like starving myself like 1,200 calories a day when it's not it's not needed.
Yeah.
You don't need to do that.
Yeah.
Some people even say they're eating more than they were when they were in their overweight phase. Was that the case for you too?
Probably eating more regularly for sure. Like I would probably have just a large like bad meal a day when I was in that phase. Going out for some fast food, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Whereas now I definitely eat more regularly throughout the day and consistently, and my meals are always big meals because you're having to hit those goals. But yeah, definitely it's much more satisfying way to eat.
Yeah.
For sure.
So much that happens.
How do you feel like your fridge looks different than it did before?
Drawers of Fairlife. And
So I think
yogurt.
I think I sent that picture to you guys before, but yeah, I literally have my my middle drawer, which used to have all like beers and like high noons and stuff like that for my parties and stuff I'd have, and literally all that is gone now, and now it's Fairlife's, one row of energy drinks and yogurts.
Yeah.
So
Everybody's coming over to party now.
Yeah, it's
Church just got Fairlife in the
It's just caffeine and protein.
I tell people like bring your own stuff. 'Cause
Caffeine and protein. Give it 2 hours. We'll
Yeah.
see who's.
Yeah. So that's big change in the fridge. Just all meat,
Yeah.
protein, and yogurt basically.
Funniest thing in the world now is like if we buy a 6-pack of beer or any like alcoholic beverage, it'll last like 8 months or something like that. Like like that one
had,
Busch Light is still in there from last freaking whatever 4th of July.
Yeah, we've had like 3 high noons in our fridge since the 4th of July. Literally the 4th of July,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
And it is December 8th, the time of this recording. December 9th.
It's probably gotta check that. Probably expired.
Yeah, so obviously, like, it seems like one of the big things that shifted for you too, other than just the intention to eat more protein and paying attention to that, was like the actual availability of the high protein foods, keeping those on deck.
Yeah, it's really kind of cleaning out the cabinets was a big thing for me. Atomic Habits, great book for me, and that was kind of putting that obstacle between you and that bad decision. So like literally, if I want to make a bad decision, I have to physically get in my car and drive somewhere to go do that, as opposed to before where it was just lots of options just in the cabinets, in the freezer, in the fridge. So yeah, just keeping what's on hand as healthy as possible and as aligned with my goals as possible.
Yeah, I want to stay on that, and we can maybe shift into some of the mindset stuff too, because that idea of not keeping unhealthy foods on hand is like that right there is biblical wisdom. Because when we read the Bible, it's not just telling us that we need to like outwill every single one of our fleshly desires. It talks about how we need to be wise and how we need to remove stumbling blocks to flee, and we need to flee from sexual sin. Right? It doesn't say like stay strong in the midst of all this sexual sin. It says flee from sexual sin. That's the wise thing to do, right? It says remove the stumbling block, right? And so often guys have this idea that, well, I just need more willpower. I just need more discipline. And I'm like, dude, like you've had the discipline, obviously, sufficient discipline to succeed in this way financially, to progress in this area of life. But for some reason here, the area where you have absolutely no intentionality and there's a million stumbling blocks, you continue to falter, right? That's just a lack of wisdom. So what are some like the biggest lessons other than that you kind of learned from a mindset perspective that help you, actually find this consistency?
Yeah, I think mindset-wise, I think it comes back to, again, doing it for myself, not doing it for others. That's kind of the thing I always go back to is, you're never going to succeed if you're only doing it. It's always good to have those outside forces. If you're a father, you're doing it for your kids. If you're a husband, you're doing it for your wife. But again, you need to do it for yourself as well. A lot of times when I'm talking to people and asking them to go work out with me or whatever it may be, they're like, oh, I'm busy. I got to spend time with the kids. I can't go to the gym because if I go to the gym, then that's an hour I'm not gonna be able to be with my kids. it's like, well, if you go to the gym now, that's gonna keep you healthy, so you can be with your kids, longer and be more of an impact to them, and actually, be a good influence on them for the rest of their lives. And it's so that's a big thing for me, is just you have to recognize, in order to help others, you have to help yourself first. Whereas before I was much more of, I don't need to really worry about myself. I'm gonna make sure that others are good to go before I worry about myself, and you never get to that point where you worry about yourself then. So I think that's probably the biggest mindset shift, is just kind of actually taking ownership and seeing what's important for you.
It's the biggest thing, in my opinion, because everybody's kind of experienced something similar to the whole idea of maybe you have a family member that's falling off the wagon in some area of life, and you're trying to reel them back in, and no matter what you do, they can't help themselves. You can't help them. And I think in weight loss and financial change, relationship change, it's all something that somebody has to conclude within themselves before anything's actually going to work. So you can armbend somebody all you want to make this change, whether it be a loved one or a friend or a family member or whatever it is. But if they haven't themselves concluded that they want to see something different with their life, it's not going to work. No matter what I tell them. I can tell them everything. I'm thinking of like 2 different situations personally in my life. One's a fitness related one, where it's like, until you make the decision yourself, like, I can give you all this advice that you want, but it's not going to matter. It's not going to matter. You have to conclude within yourself that you want to make a change, and that's the only way that this is going to actually work.
One thing that you guys make us do in DK is like write down what the current identity is and what you want your future identity to be. And that was a real kind of telling exercise, because everything on my future identity that was always in my head, of kind of like, I was almost lying to myself saying that this is the kind of person you already are. But when you actually like evaluate it, like, no, like you're not doing anything that's leading you to this future identity, or even anything remotely close to it. So that was kind of telling to me that you're kind of been lying to yourself almost, that you have this kind of aura of success around you, but when you actually do a little bit of a under surface level, you're not.
Trying to light on all those deep, dark parts of your soul.
Yeah.
Sometimes when people hear the word identity, it kind of seems hard to grasp, right? What does identity mean to you? Like, when you say shift my self-identity, what do you actually shift?
Yeah, so I think something with identity is, well, how I look at it is, kind of how you see yourself, of course, but the actions that you're taking day to day, are they in line with that or not? And that's kind of a big thing that kind of hit me is, yes, I have all these great plans and ideas and success that I want to be, but does spending 2 hours on social media lead to that? No. Does watching this TV show lead to that? No. So that was kind of, in regards to identity, that was kind of the turning point for me, is actually aligning my actions with what I feel my identity should be. And so that was a big shift, because I always had this kind of surface level vision of success for myself, but it just definitely wasn't doing things in my life that was leading to that.
There's like a feedback loop there as well, where it's this idea of figure out the identity that it is that you want to become, align your actions with that, and then when you do those actions, you just reinforce that you're becoming that. So there's this like feedback loop, this flywheel that happens. Shift identity, shift actions. Execute those actions, reinforce identity, and it keeps going around and around and around and around. And that's the biggest thing, and that's where the whole default actions thing, that everything that we preach inside of DK. There's guys that'll come in and they won't do the modules. They'll be like 4 weeks in and they're like, hey, I just started looking at the modules. I'm like, one, there's a reason that that's literally in the contract to do that, because if you don't do it, you're not going to sustain the success here. And they'll dive into it. They're like, man, I should have started this sooner. I'm like, bro, it's the first step that everybody does. That's why we tell you to do it, because it matters. And the more time that you spend, the real secret sauce of DK is the more time that you spend executing those actions that are in alignment with the identity, the more reinforced it's going to become. And by the end of your initial period with us, the higher likelihood you have of sustaining it if you did it longer. Right? That's why it's like priority number 1 is come in and do the modules, go through the courses, actually do the mental, the psychology work that comes with it. And the reason I'm going on this tangent is because I know it's going to be mostly DK people watching this. If you're one of those guys that's messaged me and said, I'm just now going through this, that wasn't smart. Do it now, right?
When hitting those actions, that's a huge thing, because I even feel it if I kind of not fall off, but if I'm like traveling or whatever, and like I drove from Arizona to Chicago last week, and that was about 48 hours where I was just either driving or exhausted and sleeping. And then like the next day, Monday morning, I woke up, I just like felt awful and just like just had this like look in the mirror and just didn't feel good about what I saw. And again, got back on kind of nutrition, got to the gym that night, and then just felt better. Everything kind of clicked back in, and then the next morning I woke up feeling good. So it's like you get it a lot where it's like, oh, you have to go to the gym today, or you have to eat like that today, or whatever. It's like, no, I don't have to, but that's what makes me feel good. That's what kind of
it reminds me who I am.
That feeds me, So it's that's
part of the feedback loop.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a big thing, and kind of go back to nutrition. It's people have this idea, okay, you're on this journey, so you like can't do certain things, and it's like, no, I'll either choose to follow exactly my plan, or I'll choose, hey, in this situation, I'm gonna enjoy myself and hang out with my friends and eat something that's not necessarily completely in line, but I know tomorrow morning I'm back on track and going forward.
Yeah, I think that's one of the important things about everything that we do, like from a practical standpoint, from a tactical standpoint, from the group calls to the actual mindset practices, to the workouts, to the nutrition, is not just that these things are going to have a tangible effect on who you are, on how you're feeling, your psyche, and your body, but every single task, like you said, is evidence to your mind that you are the person you say you want to be. Every single task, every single rep that you do is a little piece of subconscious evidence that you're adding to that ballot box of Drew is this type of person, right? But every time that we do something that's out of alignment with our identity, there's another vote, right? So in Rome, I believe it's in Romans 7 or Romans 8, Paul talks about how just because you can do certain things doesn't mean you should do certain things, even if you have the freedom to do them. And it's beautiful to have freedom and like technically be able to like eat whatever you want, and like you don't have to work out in this consistent pattern. Technically, there's flexibility, there's things you can do to adjust your programming, blah 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 blah. But every single time you do something, you have to ask yourself, does this support the identity that I want to build for myself? Would the best version of myself do this behavior right here?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's really important.
We are coming very close on time. We need to go check in for our big special event tomorrow. But I wanted to give Drew the honor of telling people what we're doing tomorrow.
Yeah, so through some, let's say, positive peer pressure, we have agreed to run a half Ironman here in Haines City, Florida. So we will be going to turn our bikes in today, and bright and early tomorrow morning we'll be starting that.
Yeah. So just so everybody is aware of what's going on, I know you had a lot of questions. Because a year ago today was when Drew and I had this initial conversation. Down 120 pounds, deeper in his faith than ever before, looking for other avenues to increase his wealth that he's never found before, improving himself like crazy, and running a half freaking Ironman. Okay, a year after making this decision. So we're not the type to endorse the requirement to do physical challenges like this. Okay, it's not required to be healthy. You don't actually have to run a half Ironman to be healthy. Okay, that wasn't actually a program part of his regimen.
I actually don't recommend it.
Actually, on the side of maybe don't recommend it, but
I literally was struggling in Nashville in April. We ran that mile after that challenge, and I could not run a full mile without stopping.
That was only 8 months ago.
And now we're doing a 70.3 mile Ironman, 1.2 mile swim, 56 mile bike, 13.2.
The bike ride this morning was a little faster than I anticipated, boys.
But I think the point of all this, and this is like a big full circle exclamation point on the last year of Drew's life, is that when you make that shift, then anything becomes possible, right? Literally anything becomes possible. Like he's chosen to just do one of the hardest endurance events that any human could possibly do, and he's gonna smoke it. So
that's the plan.
what a shift it's been. I'm excited for what 2024 brings you and all of us too.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. It's been a crazy year for sure, and looking forward to doing even more next year.
Heck yeah.
Thank you for being
not
here,
an Ironman, but
we're not progressions in other areas.
In every other area other than that.
15 PRs, we'll say.
Thanks for doing this, bro.
Appreciate it.
If people want to talk to you and hang out with you, where should they find you? Twitter, Instagram? Is
Yeah,
that your
probably
place?
Twitter and Instagram with 2 I mostly. Yeah.
Cool.
At Hartmann D.
Hartmann D.
on
2
X.
N's.
2 N's. Yeah.
2 N's at the
Yeah.
D. Yeah. And we tweet about them. We post about them all the time.
Yeah. You'll see me on there.
Awesome.
2 N's with a
Thanks,
D.
bro. Thanks,
All right,
bro.
let's close this thing out.
That was fun. Cool.
All right. Thanks, guys.